6 games in a row might not sound groundbreaking at first, but once you realize that no player has ever accomplished this throughout more than 30 years of Division I history, the achievement takes on a whole new level of significance.
Caitlin's done in the last 3 years, 4 years, is just mind-blowing in basketball. She works at it. She plays at a level that no one has reached yet in the WNBA.
No one had ever crossed that milestone before. Not Cheryl Swoops, not Diana Taurasi, and not even Kelsey Plum, who came closer than anyone else but still couldn't reach it. Caitlin Clark didn't just match the standard, she completely rewrote it. What's even more remarkable is that her performance improved when the pressure was at its highest. Opposing teams threw 6 different defensive strategies at her over 6 straight games, yet none of them managed to slow her down. But there's another side to the story that makes this run even more intriguing. Despite Clark's historic stretch, the Indiana Fever were sitting at 10-7, a record that doesn't seem to reflect the level of dominance she displayed. How can a player perform at such an extraordinary level while her team's results remain relatively modest? So what was really happening during this remarkable run, and what do the numbers actually tell us? Let's take a closer look. Putting together 6 consecutive elite performances is far more difficult than it sounds. A long basketball season is designed to test even the best players. Opponents constantly adjust their game plans, the travel schedule takes its toll, and small injuries often build up in the background, making sustained excellence incredibly difficult.
Caitlin Clark left the Fever's loss yesterday to the Mercury after suffering a back injury in the third quarter.
Schedules and those hidden challenges slowly chip away at a player's effectiveness, even if they never miss a game. That's why putting together 6 consecutive games with at least 20 points and 5 assists is about far more than raw talent. It demands relentless consistency. One poor shooting night, one half where nothing falls, or one defensive adjustment that finally works is all it takes to end the streak. That's exactly why no player had managed to reach this mark over more than 3 decades of Division I basketball. On paper, the milestone may seem straightforward. In reality, it's one of the hardest accomplishments to sustain because basketball is a game of constant adjustments, not isolated highlights. A player can explode for 30 points on any given night simply because every shot happens to fall. Another can pile up double-digit assists when an opponent's defense repeatedly breaks down. But those kinds of performances don't always carry over from game to game. Caitlin Clark's 6-game run was built on something much more reliable. She created offense in every possible way, knocking down pull-up jumpers, attacking the basket through contact, earning trips to the free throw line, and continuing to serve as the primary playmaker no matter how defenses tried to take the ball out of her hands. Her production wasn't fueled by luck or a temporary hot streak. It came from a complete offensive skill set that held up every single night. Over a stretch of 6 games, randomness begins to disappear. What remains is a clear picture of a player's true level of performance, and Clark's numbers reflected sustained excellence rather than favorable circumstances. There's another important piece of this achievement that's easy to overlook. Clark wasn't handed an easy path. She didn't benefit from facing a string of injury-depleted teams or opponents, dragging through the second night of back-to-back games. Instead, she faced a wide range of competition, from championship contenders to rebuilding squads, playing both at home and on the road against defenses that all presented unique challenges. That variety makes the accomplishment even more impressive. If every opponent defended her the same way, there would always be room to question the streak. Instead, she succeeded against completely different game plans. Some teams aggressively trapped her the moment she came off a screen, forcing the ball out of her hands almost immediately. Others packed into zone defenses, inviting difficult perimeter shots while taking away driving lanes. Still others switched every screen, constantly rotating bigger, longer defenders onto her in an effort to wear her down over 4 quarters. Each defensive approach is designed to expose a different weakness. The remarkable part is that Clark answered every one of them. This wasn't a case of solving the same puzzle 6 times. It was 6 completely different challenges, each requiring a different solution. As one observer put it, "I don't think this is only a huge moment for the WNBA. Everyone has worked incredibly hard to grow the game, and I truly believe this is one of the biggest moments we've ever seen for women's sports as a whole, and she kept finding the right solution every single night. That's one of the biggest reasons basketball analysts have struggled to identify a true historical comparison for this achievement. Many memorable scoring streaks throughout the game's history have come during favorable stretches of the schedule, long homestands, matchups against struggling teams, or periods where opponents shared similar defensive styles. Caitlin Clark's 6-game run offered none of those advantages. Instead, she earned it against a wide variety of opponents, each presenting a completely different challenge. That makes the accomplishment even more impressive and helps explain why no player had managed to reach this milestone over the previous 3 decades. There's another side of the story that the box score can't fully capture: the mental pressure that builds once everyone realizes history is within reach. By the 4th and 5th games, coaches, players, broadcasters, and fans were all talking about the streak. Every performance carried extra attention, and every possession came with heightened expectations. That changes the psychological challenge entirely. When a player doesn't realize they're building toward history, they can simply play on instinct. But once the streak becomes the headline, every missed shot, every turnover, and every possession feels far more significant. Staying locked in under that kind of spotlight is a challenge that has ended countless historic runs across sports. There's one more factor that deserves recognition before comparing Clark's accomplishment to those who came close before her: the physical punishment. This wasn't a streak built by standing behind the three-point line waiting for open looks. Clark repeatedly attacked the basket, absorbed contact, fought through screens, and continued taking hits every single game. Over 6 straight contests, that physical wear begins to accumulate, even if a player never misses a minute. A streak fueled primarily by perimeter shooting would naturally place less strain on the body. Clark's production, however, came through constant rim pressure and aggressive playmaking, making the physical demands of maintaining this level even greater than the numbers alone suggest. Why no one had ever reached 6? Every record gains meaning because of the players who came close before it. Prior to Clark's historic run, the benchmark for consecutive games with at least 20 points and 5 assists stood at 5. Several outstanding guards had reached that level over the years, including Kelsey Plum, one of the most accomplished scorers of her generation. As many have pointed out, despite standing just 5'8", Plum developed into one of the nation's most dominant offensive players during her college career. Her 5-game streak wasn't the result of a lucky stretch. It reflected the skill of an elite scorer and one of the purest shooters the women's game has seen. So why did the record remain stuck at 5 for so many years? And what made that 6th game so difficult to reach? A major reason comes down to offensive responsibility. Players who carry nearly every aspect of an offense face the toughest challenge. They're expected to create their own scoring opportunities, organize the offense, generate shots for teammates, and consistently deal with the opponent's top defenders. Ironically, while having the ball more creates additional chances to extend a streak, it also creates more opportunities for something to go wrong. One difficult matchup, one off shooting night, or one defensive scheme that disrupts the rhythm can immediately bring everything to an end. Many of the players who previously approached this milestone were incredible scorers, but they weren't always responsible for orchestrating every possession. Caitlin Clark has served as the offensive centerpiece for the Indiana Fever throughout this entire stretch, yet she still maintained the streak despite carrying that enormous workload. Every additional game brings smarter adjustments, greater defensive attention, and even more pressure. That's exactly what makes extending a streak beyond 5 so extraordinarily difficult, and why Clark's 6th consecutive game ultimately separated her from every player who came before her. The closer any player gets to making history, the harder opponents work to prevent it. Every extra game gives coaches more film to study, more defensive adjustments to install, and more motivation to be the team that ends the streak. That's exactly what happened throughout the league. Kelsey Plum's remarkable run stopped at 5 games, not because her ability suddenly disappeared, but because defenses eventually caught up and found ways to disrupt her rhythm. Caitlin Clark, however, pushed beyond that same breaking point. She kept producing even after every opponent knew exactly what she was chasing, and that's what transforms this accomplishment from an outstanding stretch into a truly historic one. The numbers behind the historic run now set the streak itself aside for a moment and focus purely on the production. Across those 6 games, Caitlin Clark averaged 25.7 points and 8.7 assists per game, numbers that would represent an all-WNBA caliber season if maintained over an entire year. Impressive as those averages are, they become even more remarkable when paired with her efficiency. Clark posted a true shooting percentage in the low 60s, a mark that reflects far more than simply putting points on the scoreboard. It shows that she continued to score efficiently despite facing defenses whose primary objective was to force the ball out of her hands. That's an extremely difficult balance to maintain. Most guards who serve as their team's primary offensive engine naturally become less efficient over time. As opponents gather more film, identify tendencies, and build defensive schemes specifically designed to slow them down, shot quality usually declines and production becomes harder to sustain. Clark experienced that same level of defensive attention, but her efficiency remained remarkably high, making this stretch even more extraordinary.
Points as Clark pounces for Howard.
League in assists. Right behind her is Caitlin Clark.
Opposing coaching staffs did everything they could to slow Caitlin Clark down. They adjusted lineups, experimented with different defensive coverages, and built game plans specifically around limiting her impact. Yet none of those changes produced the desired result. Instead of fading under the increased defensive focus, Clark continued to elevate her play. In fact, as the streak went on, her scoring remained at an elite level, showing that even after opponents adapted, they still couldn't consistently contain her. But the scoring tells only part of the story. Her average of 8.7 assists per game reveals just how complete her offensive impact really was. Clark wasn't simply putting points on the board herself. She was constantly creating easy scoring opportunities for her teammates. Every time defenses collapsed to stop her, she recognized the opening and delivered the ball to open shooters or cutting teammates, allowing the Indiana Fever offense to thrive. That's what separates an elite scorer from a true offensive centerpiece. A player who only scores allows defenses to concentrate all of their attention on taking away one option. But when a player can both score at a high level and consistently create for others, every defensive decision becomes a gamble. Double team her, and someone else gets an open look. Stay home on the shooters, and she attacks the basket herself. For 6 straight games, Clark forced opponents into that impossible dilemma, and she took advantage of whichever option they gave her. There's another fascinating statistical trend behind this stretch. Normally, when a player's scoring increases, her assist numbers tend to decline. The reason is simple. The more possessions that end with her taking the shot, the fewer opportunities remain to create baskets for teammates. Clark broke that pattern. During this 6-game run, both her scoring and her playmaking rose together. That combination suggests she wasn't entering possessions with a predetermined plan to either shoot or pass. Instead, she consistently read each defensive coverage in real time and made the correct basketball decision based on what the defense allowed. If defenders stayed attached to her teammates, she attacked and scored. If they collapsed to stop her drive, she immediately found the open player. That level of decision-making is one of the clearest signs of an elite floor general. Her trips to the free throw line provide even more evidence of how she generated these numbers. Players who rely primarily on contested jump shots rarely draw significant contact. By contrast, players who relentlessly attack the paint-force defenders into difficult situations, often leading to fouls as they try to prevent easy baskets. Clark's ability to consistently pressure the rim throughout this stretch added another dimension to her offense. She wasn't relying on difficult outside shooting alone. She mixed perimeter scoring with aggressive drives, putting constant pressure on opposing defenses and creating efficient scoring opportunities from every area of the floor.
Clark.
Flagrant foul. We have seen some of these cheap shots not even get a regular foul. Fans will remember in 2024.
Another detail that stands out is Caitlin Clark's increased trips to the free throw line during this 6-game stretch. Compared to her season averages entering the run, she was getting to the line more frequently, reinforcing the idea that this wasn't simply a shooting streak fueled by hot perimeter shooting. It was driven by relentless attacks on the basket and constant pressure on opposing defenses. Her decision-making was just as impressive. When high-usage players become more aggressive offensively, turnovers often rise with that increased responsibility. They force difficult passes, take unnecessary risks, and occasionally lose control trying to create something out of nothing. Clark's numbers told a different story. Even while carrying an enormous offensive workload, her turnover rate remained close to her season average instead of climbing. That suggests her increased production wasn't the result of reckless basketball. It came from making smart reads, controlling the pace, and consistently making the right decisions with the ball. That's the difference between a sustainable stretch of elite play and a temporary hot streak built on low-percentage gambles. Looking beyond the streak, runs like this also present an interesting challenge for organizations. Historic individual performances naturally capture headlines, and while that attention is well-deserved, it can sometimes overshadow broader questions about roster depth, defensive consistency, and long-term team construction. Eventually, every streak comes to an end, whether because of tougher matchups, natural statistical regression, or simply the difficulty of maintaining that level over time. When that happens, those larger conversations don't disappear. Instead, they return to the forefront. That leads to perhaps the biggest question surrounding Clark's achievement. Was this six-game stretch an extraordinary peak, or is it a glimpse of the level she can consistently reach moving forward? Clark's career suggests both possibilities deserve consideration. She has repeatedly demonstrated the ability to produce elite stretches throughout her basketball journey, while also experiencing the physical demands that come with carrying such a massive offensive workload over the course of a long season. That makes workload management increasingly important. With playoff positioning, postseason aspirations, and individual awards still to be decided, the Fever must balance maximizing Clark's impact today while ensuring she's healthy for the games that matter most later in the year. Her performance has already changed the conversation around the league. A stretch this dominant inevitably influences discussions surrounding MVP voting and other major awards. Whether fair or not, analysts and voters will likely compare every remaining stretch of Clark's season to the standard she established during these 6 remarkable games. There's also the legacy aspect. Records rarely last forever, but the ones remembered most are usually defined not only by the numbers themselves, but by the circumstances surrounding them. Clark's achievement wasn't built against an easy schedule. It wasn't fueled by empty statistics or inflated opportunities. It came against a variety of opponents, under relentless national attention, while maintaining elite efficiency and carrying one of the heaviest offensive workloads in the league. Those are the kinds of accomplishments that tend to hold their significance long after the numbers are eventually surpassed. Whether she extends the streak or not, this run has already become an important chapter in her career. More importantly, it has reshaped expectations for what sustained excellence can look like in today's WNBA, and added another remarkable milestone to Caitlin Clark's growing legacy.
Clark is having a standout season, setting a new record in the WNBA, consecutive games with at least 20 points and 5 assists.
What is certain is that Caitlin Clark has established a new benchmark for sustained elite performance in the WNBA. Any player who eventually attempts to surpass this 6-game streak will now be judged against a standard that simply didn't exist before Clark set it. That's what makes this accomplishment more than just another record. It becomes part of the league's history. 6 consecutive games, a feat no player had ever achieved before, accomplished against a demanding schedule with constantly changing defensive challenges. She paired elite scoring with outstanding playmaking while maintaining an incredible level of efficiency, numbers many players would struggle to produce over an entire season, let alone in a pressure-filled stretch like this. At the same time, the Indiana Fever's 10-7 record serves as an important reminder that basketball remains the ultimate team sport. Even an extraordinary individual performance can't guarantee victories without consistent contributions across the entire roster. Now the focus shifts to what comes next. Was this the beginning of a new level for Clark, or will opposing teams eventually discover a way to slow her down? That's the question the rest of the season will answer. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button if you believe Caitlin Clark will break her own record before the playoffs. Then leave a comment and tell us which statistic from this historic 6-game run impressed you the most. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next video, we'll break down the defensive strategies rival coaches are using as they search for a way to contain one of the most dynamic players in the WNBA.